Time to get real, reality TV aficionados. Welcome to the Georgio Says podcast. I'm your host, the one and only Georgio Takanakis, and I'm here serving you the juiciest updates on all your favorite reality shows weekly, as well as the hottest pop culture trends, and even exclusive interviews that will leave you wanting more. This podcast will keep you on the edge of your seat. We definitely need to talk about this. The Georgio Says podcast starts now.
All right, what's up, you guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Georgio Says podcast. Happy Tuesday. And yes, we do have some things to unpack today. I actually want to discuss the Kenya Moore interview with Carlos King. Part 2 came out today, and a lot was said, so we're definitely going to dive into that. But before we dive into that, I do want to discuss a couple hot topics that are kind of going on around in the Bravo universe, if you will. One of the things I wanted to discuss was that I am seeing a lot of feedback from the Bethany and Rachel interview that she did last week. And now the video version has dropped, so you can actually watch it, which in my opinion is always great because I feel like visually you get more out of it sometimes, especially in an interview when you can see the people actually talking to each other. But I guess, I don't want to get myself into hot water with the people that are coming at Bethany right now. But I do have a couple questions, and I mean this wholeheartedly. I really don't get why okay, so let me take a step back. I feel like, and this is just based off of what I've seen people say and talk about on different podcasts or YouTube channels or TikTok accounts or Instagram, whatever have you. It seems like a lot of the people that are voicing the strongest anger at Bethany are people that at some point were major fans of Bethany. And it almost feels like a bad breakup of some sort. I mean, I don't want to say it. Well, yeah, it kind of does. It almost feels like as if Bethany really ripped these people's hearts out of their chest and stomped on it personally, And I get if you're disappointed because at one point maybe you looked up to her aspirationally or found inspiration in some of the things that she was doing. I get that, but I still don't understand why everyone's so angry. I mean, it's one thing to say, you know what, I don't think she should be the face of this. Okay, fine. Everyone's entitled to an opinion. But it's just this the energy behind it is as she's the worst human being alive. Or I mean, I don't know. Even this, I guess this goes back a little bit too, because even when she first got on TikTok and she was doing the beauty review thing, and people were just up in arms about her doing anything. Anything. I feel she can't make a sandwich. Excuse me. She can't make a sandwich sometimes. People are she didn't really eat that sandwich. It's okay, well, if that, I mean, I think there's two different things going on here. I think there's mistreatment of people that work in reality TV. However, I think it's interesting that there's a lot of people speaking out about Bethany being the wrong face of this more than what actually are the real issues. If these are real issues, then what are we doing about them? Nobody was really gonna do anything about it, I feel like. I think it was just one of those things that people accepted. And even a lot of you guys, are kind of mixed in the way that you feel about certain elements about some of the allegations in that letter. And I'm not going to go back into that because I've discussed it. But even with this whole Rachel interview, I get maybe I'm just not fazed by anything really. So I would assume that if she's going to interview Rachel, that she's going to get something out of this interview that's going to fit the narrative around what she's discussing around reality reckoning. So, like I guess that part was a no-brainer for me because it's like, well, what? Yes, I'm sure she cares to some extent about Rachel as a human. I don't think she's like a cold, like I don't think that's how she operates. I think business-wise, she's a completely different person, and publicly she understands how this machine works. So she knows how to make it work to her favor. And you know what? Excuse me. As much as people are angry with this three-part interview that she did with the ad revenue and wanting to ask these questions, did you pay her? Are you going to give her the ad revenue? It's like, what does that matter so much? Because I guess my thing is like she just flew out there. So like I guess I'm just confused why people care who Rachel went to for her first interview. Does it matter? If you felt disgusted by her and whatever, before, I don't think it matters what person she picked to go sit down and talk to them. She would have been just as prepared to answer questions in a way, but it also would have been it would have been slightly edited for salaciousness and clickbait reasons. So a podcast, yes. Was there a better podcast for her to go on? I'm not sure. I don't think Bethany is the same as Howie Mandel. Yes, she didn't watch the show, but she was on a show on Bravo TV and knows how it operates, and she understands how the machine works, specifically at Bravo. So I think this pairing made more sense than Howie and Tom Sandoval. So that's just kind of like where I sat with it. But I think the funny part though is that I guess they when they were talking about Lala capitalizing off, when Rachel sent everyone the email with this like cease and desist about not sharing the video that Tom illegally recorded without her consent. But so she talks about the send it to Daryl and how Lala capitalized off of it. And so I guess when Bethany posted that, she was the number one podcast worldwide, I guess alluding to the fact that, this interview really, got her podcast to number one. And people obviously were chiming in and being like sarcastic about that and whatnot. But Lala poked fun at it, saying like, thank you to the number one podcast in the world for mentioning send it to Daryl, and then she put a shop link on it. And so yes, did the cast capitalize? Like, did Lala capitalize off of this? Did Sheena capitalize off of this? Of course they did. Is Tom being rewarded for bad behavior? Yes, of course he is. I don't think Rachel's made for reality TV. I think that's just the extent of it. I think at this stage of the game, there's enough resources and understanding and podcasts and docuseries and all of that fun stuff where you understand that the world that is reality TV is not the way it comes off. Like it, we don't know what really goes on behind closed doors and when people are having meetings and when these cast members are having actual conversations with their producers. You know what I mean? We're not there for that and we don't know the day to day. And as much as like someone like me studies it to sometimes a sickening degree, it's even that's not enough. Like even then I wouldn't understand it completely because I haven't gone through it. I haven't even done one season of any type of reality TV to even remotely understand what goes on. But what I do understand is that, the industry is shifting anyway. We see people are producing themselves. Producers don't really need to do much because people are showing up to their respective show with fake storylines. And this is something that Kenya got into, and we'll discuss a little bit more in detail when I discuss the interview part 2 with Kenya and Carlos King. But, it's just the times are changing, and I think people are more aware of themselves being on a reality show, and they're looking to create this like soundbite moment or be a meme or so it's a popularity contest in the moment, and there's not really too much authenticity. Now, I'm not saying everybody's going to bring every facet of every little thing going on in their life, but to be fair, a lot of these shows now you're seeing a lot of, especially the newcomers, where they're just given the contract and they get to come in and I guess production just hopes for the best. Hope it vibes, you know what I mean? Like we talked about, I don't even want to talk about her. She's not even on the show anymore. Beverly Hills. Diana. They gave her diamond like within like such a short amount of time, and all we got out of that was a bunch of nonsense and one villainous moment that they teased us in the trailer with that ultimately led to nothing. So, it is changing. So then if it's changing, let's make it better. Let's make it more equitable. Let's just change the process a little bit. Like, I agree. Like, I feel like it's better when you really get someone who isn't a fan of of these shows. You know what I mean? Like, because it's not as real. They know what they're walking into. They know ahead of time, oh, they're going to need me to be either the pot stirrer, the bone collector, so I'm going to go and I'm going to bring it. And then in their heads, they're drawing up what type of storyline they can come up with. It's the nature of the beast at this point. And I think viewers are smart and they can see right through it. Although I will say you guys are saying that a lot in my New York City recaps about how like this moment was fake or this moment seemed like produced. I'm not seeing that on New York. I mean, I'm aware that there's certain elements where like people are bringing up stuff or maybe doing things that are for the basis of like entertainment for the show, but I think everyone's job is to kind of do that. It's an entertainment show at the end of the day. So people are all going to be trying to make a moment. I think the difference is, trying to make a moment authentically in that moment that you're having rather than walking into every single scene and situation and saying, oh, I already know what I'm going to say. You can tell sometimes when you watch one of the scenes that the person rehearsed this in their head or in the car on the way or whatever. I don't know. It's shifting. And I think it's changing how older, like the OG cast members or people that have been on their respective shows for a long time, when they see that all this change is coming and it's not the same, it's hard to, I guess, maybe be motivated to want to give good story or good content. So I think there's a lot of different factors that are playing into things. But no, I mean, I honestly think that with regards to like Bethany and like the Rachel interview and what Bethany's doing with this whole situation, I think it really does come down to from what I've seen, this seems to be like a very bad breakup between people that at some point really loved and adored her, right? And put her up on a pedestal. And then somewhere along the line, she betrayed them. And now it doesn't matter what she does. And that's where I guess I get confused. It's like, maybe I'm just not seeing it. So, but let me know your thoughts. I mean, I honestly, I would love to have more in-depth conversation around this rather than just like the superficiality of what like is the obvious in a lot of it, like with like the whole, did she pay Rachel? Like, why does she have to answer that? I just don't understand why she's being held to the fire about just simply interviewing Rachel, who, again, I guess, and I'll say it again in case people forgot, but Rachel reached out to Bethany. So, I mean, if Bethany was really trying to capitalize off of this, really, wouldn't she have contacted Rachel? She was already talking about her. That would have been like, oh, that would make more sense to me. But knowing what we know, that Rachel's people reached out to Bethany, and then Bethany even flew to Arizona, which people were even talking shit about that too. It's just like, I don't know. I mean, it's just I'm not kissing Bethany's ass. I don't stand for her. I don't stand for any housewife like that. So it's not about that. And I don't always agree with everything Bethany does and says, but I think I can kind of see through what it is and see that at the end of the day, there's something that's going to come out of this whole reality reckoning that I think will be positive and will start to create some change. I think the conversation that we're about to get into with, what Kenya discussed Carlos King in part 2 of their interview, things are changing, and I think the more and more people are having conversations and being more transparent, I think it kind of gives everyone a little bit more insight as to like how these things work and operate, and it isn't too far off from Hollywood in that regard. So we will definitely be getting into that and more. We're going to take a little break, and when we come back, we're going to dive into the Carlos King and Kenya Moore interview part 2. Very good. We'll be right back.
Elevate your style with ShopSecondWind.com, New York City's leading Latina-owned fashion brand, celebrated by J.Lo, Becky B, Ava Longoria, and AOC. As seen in Vogue, Elle, and more. And guess what? An unnamed housewife adores them too. Exclusive for our listeners, get 20% off this August until August 31st using my special code GeorgioSays20 at checkout. Head on over to ShopSecondWind.com and use my code GeorgioSays20 and get you something nice. Shop now. What's up, guys? I wanted to take a few seconds to talk to you guys about Golly Nutrition. Their gummies have been something I have implemented into my daily routine for the last 5 years, and I am so pleased they are a podcast sponsor. Golly Nutrition is an inventive, people-focused nutrition company committed to providing innovative products that make taking your daily supplements simple and delicious. Their products are formulated with quality ingredients you can pronounce and flavors your taste buds will enjoy. And at the core of it all, they lead with purpose. Golly for Good is an initiative committed to playing a profound role in supporting the health of our planet as well as our local communities. And if you go to golly.com and use my special code, TheGeorgioSays, at checkout, you will receive a special discount. That code again is TheGeorgioSays. Go to golly.com and check them out. Now let's get back into the episode.
All right, guys, welcome back. All right, so we need to get into the Carlos King, Kenya Moore interview. Part 2 came out today, and if you haven't seen it, I'm not going to give all of the details away because I don't want to spoil all the fun parts that I think that would be spoilers. But I will give you pretty much the full overview and tone of the conversation. Because there were some interesting points made, and I think it's only fair that you watch it, regardless of how you feel about Kenya or her performance this past season. I think it's she sat down with the right person, and I said this about Nene. Like, Carlos clearly has that open door connection with a lot of these ladies, specifically like Nene, Kenya, and tons more. But when it comes to the interview, he knows how to get to the heart of the matter because he understands it from their lens a little bit more. Because he's been there, and he's done the full gamut with these ladies. So he can ask the questions that maybe others wouldn't think to ask or wouldn't want to go there, maybe because they don't want to upset or throw the person off. And rightfully so. I don't think that Nene and Kenya would have answered a lot of these questions had it been a different person asking them. That's just my take. But so we start off part 2 where they go right into the whole Phaedra Parks. When you'll remember when Kenya first came on the show, her and Phaedra, like, well, they kind of started to get along, and then they didn't after the like workout DVD situation happened, and then all of a sudden it turned into Phaedra and Kenya Moore World War II, because then we see this kind of narrative start playing out where Kenya's being painted as someone who's trying to take Apollo from Phaedra, or come on to him, and all these things. And I do remember, because the show would play it out, and it was a very strong narrative because Phaedra was very loud about a lot of it. And so Kenya kind of dived into that because there was a lot of speculation. Now, obviously we did see on the show there was this like it was a very awkward scene, but it was almost like Apollo apologizing to Kenya, but it was like you knew what he was apologizing for, but he wouldn't. It was just strange. And so she kind of discusses how it was basically a takedown. Phaedra wanted to ruin her life, and she pretty much did, because by the time she was vindicated, like when it was clear like that wasn't the case, that wasn't even true, no one cared anymore. And I think at that point the narrative had gone on for so long that it was kind of embedded on Kenya's persona, because she entered the show essentially with this kind of like scarlet letter that she didn't really need to have, but from her angle it was because she went against Phaedra. And then she recalls how Phaedra did the same thing to Candy, which, I mean, say what you want about Kenya, but when she lines it up like that, it makes sense. Like, clearly Phaedra was on a rampage. She clearly was pissed off. She wanted to take whoever it was that said or went against her down. And in that particular moment, it was Kenya. So that was, the start of where I think Kenya starts to open up more with Carlos around how, it can be one way on the show, but then it's completely different. Like she points out, like there was many times where Phaedra like said that Kenya followed Apollo to his hotel, or she saw him out in LA or like whatever, and then offered to do things to him. And Kenya says that she never saw Apollo outside of filming Real Housewives of Atlanta, like not even at the gas station, she said. So, from that angle, like I can imagine if things like that are being blown up the way that they were at the time about her, when in fact the reality was she doesn't even see him outside of filming for the show, then yeah, that would be horrific, because it's like there's nothing at that point, there isn't anything you can do, because you can't, it's out there, So then from there, she goes on to talk a little bit more about, just her treatment on the show and currently, and just whether or not she feels that, she's not bringing it this season. And I think, I think two things can be true at the same time. I think yes, Kenya isn't bringing good story. And let's be clear. I mean, no one's really been bringing good story the last couple of seasons. So it's not just this season. But if we're going to talk about story, it's like, well, when you hear Kenya on this interview talk about how none of the ladies are interesting. I mean, they're not engaging or challenging her in a real way that makes her even want to give them that, because she knows automatically they're coming at her for a viral moment, for the show, or to, just like when she in the interview talks about Courtney and how Courtney, basically rage stomped into the show and automatically started with Candy. And then from there then it was Kenya. And then it was just she's just trying to bop around. You can tell she's trying to make it happen for herself. And that's where the dynamic in terms of how someone comes onto the show earns their place, because, Kenya points out when her and Portia came on the show, they didn't know what they were doing. They weren't coming in with an agenda. They didn't have a storyline. They just were doing what they would do. You know what I mean? So it was authentic, and that's what ultimately gave them their peach, because they created these real, authentic, viral moments that will always be iconic to the franchise, because you just can't make some of that stuff up. You can't produce half of the iconic things that happened on the show. But I think now, like I was saying, what I said earlier, and in the episode, was that I think production and the way these shows are being filmed are different. And I think a lot of it is because the people going on the shows now are more savvy and understand what it is that they're walking into. So it does shift it a little bit in terms of what you're getting. Because what was interesting was what Kenya pointed out about Eva Marcel, top model girl. Kenya says she was an amazing housewife. I agree. I think and I was excited for her to join because I remembered her from Top Model, And so I just knew, I was like, oh, this is perfect, But then Kenya says that when she watched her on her first season there, she was like, that's not her. Because she had dialed it down, or because people don't want to come off a certain way. So they really kind of wash things down because they don't want to get caught up in a bad edit. And people already are aware of the Housewives and what it's about. And, it's not to say that nobody's watched clips of these shows, but it's quite a different story when you have someone joining the show who's been a fan of the show. That's when it feels weird. I think also to the viewer, at least to me, it feels weird when there's a big fan of the show that then gets a spot on the show. It almost feels like, no, hey, good for you. You got what you wanted and what you manifested. Amazing. But I'm just saying, as a viewer, it does feel a little odd. I'd almost rather it be it's never going to be a complete walk in the dark at this point. There's way too much information at our fingertips. Anybody can look up something. So no one's really walking into anything blindly anymore, per se. But I do think that there's a level of finding people that are open to the experience without knowing all too much about the experience and what goes into it and all that fun stuff. Which I'm sure opens up another can of worms, because then likely those people sometimes are the ones that get taken advantage of, because then the seasoned cast members usually take advantage of those folks because of the fact that they don't know necessarily what they're doing. But I think also with Kenya too, she's obviously feeling slighted this season in particular, because she's obviously opened up this Kenya Moore hair care salon. And, she talks with Carlos about how she filmed a good part of the process of trying to get that all done, like the planning and the build out process. And this thing works better than doing this, or the approach. And listen, if we're going to be honest, yes, Do they want us to see what these ladies are working on in the background? Sure. Okay. But at the end of the day, the Housewives are about interactions within the friend group and the drama, the conflict resolution of it all. That's what we all tune in for. You know what I mean? So I would never think that the editors would leave in the full gamut of every aspect of the process for her to start that venture. However, I do agree that it would have probably rounded out her storyline a little bit better this season if they had shown at least the start, middle, and end. But we're not even going to see the opening of the salon. So it's clear that, from her angle, she feels slighted. She also feels that production is protecting Marlo. And, you know, yeah, she feels like they're really kind of protecting her in a way that she can't understand, and that led her to not be able to answer the question of whether she was afraid that she was going to be on the chopping block, because to her point, she said, well, look at the history. There's no way I would be able to tell you that, because there's no way, like, because there's no rhyme or reason to it, is the point. There isn't. But do I think Kenya is essential for the show? Yeah, I think Portia is essential for the show. I think they should bring her back. I think they definitely need to figure out a way to revamp the cast in a way that's not like don't cast it. That's my thing. But we definitely need some OGs back. A lot of people were saying that, maybe it's time for Candy to go. Listen, I want nothing but the best for Candy, but I do think Candy's given us all she wants to give us. But I will say it's odd that we see a lot of these longer edits of Candy building her business, which they did discuss. I think Carlos brought that up, where, we do see Candy really building her empire on this show. And why is it that we're not seeing Kenya do the same? Maybe it's because they have her in a box. She's the villain of the show. And, she's the one that's going through the issue. She's always got the man issues. You know what I mean? So, but balance that out, maybe. I don't know. I just think the cast in general is just not a good fit for content production between these ladies. I really don't. I do not think that Drew needs to be on there. I still don't understand why she was given a peach to begin with. I never found her to be captivating on screen. I didn't find her to be interesting. I didn't find, even when she would get into her shenanigans, with Sheree last season, and all the bringing the dog bone to the thing. That's the stuff that I don't want to see. Those types of things to me are produced moments. And Drew clearly had other stuff going on in her real life that's now, I guess, coming out on the show. But what is she bringing to the show? Just another person that just filled a spot, it feels like. Marlo, Kenya clearly feels that Marlo's ruined the show the last 2 seasons ever since getting her peach, which, Kenya gives a warning, be careful what you wish for, because she talks about how the fans are saying it's time for a reboot. It's time for a reboot. And she said, you guys asked for Marlo to get a peach, and then now look what happened. So she was very, very clear. Marlo has ruined the show since being a full-time cast member. And I don't necessarily agree with that statement. I don't. Do I agree with how she's being utilized on the show, Marlo? No, because it's making her just look thirsty in terms of wanting to do whatever just to make production happy in the moment. But I ultimately feel like Marlo's given us a lot of content as well. So I don't want to discount her and say, oh, well, you made a friend of a full-timer and now they don't know how to act. I don't necessarily feel that way. I feel like this is how Marlo always was, or they just think that we're just seeing a lot more of her, except the difference is there's not much going on within this group. And so they know Marlo will go in and get it done, and that's what she's doing. So I can't really fault her for that, but it's also not Marlo's fault if producers are protecting her. And maybe they're protecting her because she's been bending over backwards and doing whatever it is that they're asking her to maybe do. That's my view on it. But do I want Kenya off the show? No. No, I think that's a mistake. I think Kenya is very essential to the show. And I know a lot of you guys don't agree with that, but that's okay. Listen, I think Kenya has grown over the years, and we've seen her in many different spaces. And uh, one thing I will say about her is she's got a good sense of humor about herself because when they discussed her and Portia's relationship, she described it as like Portia being her little sister, and I can see that. Because it's like, yeah, they came on the show together. They grew. They had ups and downs and downs. And that's a bigger point that I wanted to make was Kenya's sense of humor around the whole hair pulling debacle that clearly traumatized her because they discussed that. And Carlos brings up, things that Kenya no longer did after that situation because of her fear around what people were going to be comfortable doing. And she goes into great detail about it, but she makes a joke about at one point she's discussing how Portia was one of the only people that did not hit her below the belt ever, like didn't try to kick her while she was down or really go in. But then she turns and says, well, I mean, she did hit me. I mean, not really. She pulled my hair, but you know what I'm saying? And like totally made like a joke about it. And it was hilarious and it was funny, but it was a real moment for her as much as it was. And this is why I respected the statement around the situation too, is because she gave respect to Portia's side of it and said, like she was also going through a lot of stuff. So, we were both dealing with the bad part of all of that, just from different angles, different experiences. But she did say that she is someone who would never have a problem going places by herself or going and grabbing a drink by herself or grabbing dinner by herself. But after the incident and being heckled a few times in public, she refrained from eating outside at places because she just felt like, I don't know, people will feel comfortable to come do that. And I think we all forget sometimes, like when stuff like that happens to any of the reality stars that are on any of their respective shows and something like that happens, I think sometimes, you don't realize it puts them in this vulnerable position when they do go out in public spaces because you don't know what people will do. I mean, listen, we have people throwing full cans of liquid at performers on stage just to see what will happen, just to get a reaction, just to see. That's sick to me. So even though it's just as sick to think that somebody would attempt to do something to Kenya in public if she were to eat outside somewhere, that wouldn't shock me because people are crazy nowadays. So clearly there was some trauma from that. I think, she was able to kind of move through it. I think everything regarding her issues with Mark, they didn't really close up too much on that other than, she is in the situation and we will find out if she decides to use one of the embryos that she had with Mark, because she has been discussing wanting to grow her family and give her daughter a sibling. So I guess we'll have to tune in and find out on the season finale, I believe, is coming up on Sunday. I guess that's when we'll find out. But other than that, Kenya showed respect where I felt respect was due. She did say Claudia should have been given another season. I agree with that. I think that was a short-lived. I don't know why they did her like that. I felt like she was, she really brought it. Like she was just right on the fine line for me of like, okay, she came in here doing her research versus this is naturally where she can go and she's just quick-witted and she gets it. You know what I mean? It's one thing to get it versus I've studied this and it's like I'm acting. And Claudia to me was good. And even Nene gave her props because she was able to go head to head with her. So, there is no rhyme or reason for why some of these decisions are made. However, I feel that it's 50-50 if Kenya's coming back next season, whether it be because they don't want her back or whether it's because she ultimately decides that she doesn't want to come back. But I feel deep down inside that they would want to keep her. Unless there's something else going on, which made me think, though, too, she did mention in this interview that when they were filming for this current season that's airing, when they were in Portugal, they were filming, and Kenya broke the fourth wall while they were filming and basically like cussed out everyone, being like, can't believe you guys are going on with these fake storylines and these fake beefs that you guys pretend to have with each other. Like, it's ruining the show essentially. So that I wonder if some of that kind of pissed production off too. And so maybe that's why she's getting this like, edit, and they're cutting stuff out apparently. Because she also mentioned that there was a scene where Marlo basically like ran her out of a restaurant, but they conveniently left that out. So if that's true, then yes, it's clear then they're giving Marlo the good edit and they're protecting her. But that's not to say that that'll always be the case. It could change next season. You know what I mean? So I think I'm interested to see how the reunion plays out because honestly, I've not been able to get a grip to like be into the season whatsoever. And that's never been the case for Atlanta. I can always get through it, even if it's been what I would say bad. This is bad. And I think that is clear across the board. I don't think there's really too many that are like jumping through the roof about how great this season really is. It's not. But to be clear, there's nobody's story, like nobody's giving any story. So I think that's part of it too. So I think there's a combination of things happening. There's a multitude of things happening, but I don't know if this ultimately, I don't know. I do agree with Kenya though when she says that there needs to be a cast revamp for sure. Wholeheartedly, there needs to be a revamp. I don't know if maybe we're at a reboot yet. I really don't. I think I hope they're having discussions about it. I hope that whoever's in charge is already looking at it from next season's standpoint to say like, okay, so what are we going to do about this? Because it's not just a few episodes. It's the entire season. The season's ending. We've filmed the reunion and I couldn't tell you what happened with any of them other than just like the spatting and the random fighting that went on for episodes at a time. So I'm like, well, how many parts is this reunion going to be? It better only be 2 parts because there wasn't a lot of story. So it's not like we're going to be captivated by anything. But I will say that the interview with Kenya and with Nene, but with Kenya was very entertaining. And I think probably more entertaining. I said this on my TikTok recap of it, but it was more entertaining than Real Housewives of Atlanta this current season. And if we're going to add Nene's interview to the mix, then I will say the last 2 seasons. So good for you, Carlos. Shout out to Carlos King. And yes, guys, go check out his interview with Kenya. It is 2 parts on his YouTube channel. But yeah, the interview was great. I thought it was good that Kenya got to speak in a way that she was comfortable speaking because she was clearly with someone that she trusted. And I thought it was very insightful. Now, what happens with Real Housewives of Atlanta after this. I'm not sure, but we need to bring something to the table that's going to make this better. I don't think we need Courtney and dare I say Manetta. I'm not sure what they're there for. So like I think if they would just focus on just having like maybe one friend of, and then a solid like 5. I would take 5 solid housewives. And I think Atlanta would be great. It's no chemistry. There's just no chemistry. It's not working out. These people would never be in the same room together in real life ever. And that is clear as day watching it. So, but like I said, great interview. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's 2 parts. It's highly entertaining. There is one part where I could not stop laughing, and you guys will probably be hysterically laughing as well. But Kenya is trying to understand why Marlo has a chairlift in her townhouse and makes this comment about how it must be because she brings the elderly men up to her bedroom, which it's full on Kenya Moore, and the reason why I love her so much. So it's so funny that Carlos has to get up and walk away and come back, and he's still cackling, laughing, because it's just like she just keeps going. You know what I mean? And that is what I think we're not getting that. Not so much from her, right? But if she had the right people that she was filming with, and they have the right people on this cast, Kenya would be on fire. We've seen her in action. We know what she can do. So I hope that we don't lose her. And I don't want anybody to lose anything. Like I don't ever want to say, oh, I want this one fired. But I would say, like, I would question Drew's place. Does Drew need to be full-time? I would even say maybe let's revisit Marlo, okay? I know you guys were strongly against her being a full-time housewife the minute she got her peach, but I'd be happy to revisit it. You know, maybe she should go back to being friend of. Maybe that's we just maybe got to play with the puzzle pieces. I'm not sure. But either way, I'm sure everyone will be fine in the scheme of things. Kenya seems like she's got a lot of great things in the works. She says she's going to be in a movie that's coming out. She filmed a movie that's coming out this fall that she's like, I think, pretty much the star of, but she's like second person on the roster for. So that seems very exciting. So you know what? I think if anything, she'll be great. And I don't think if she doesn't come back next season that means that that's the end forever. We know that people come and go all the time. So I don't know. We'll have to keep our eyes open and keep watching and hope that they figure it out and hope that we can kind of save this franchise from getting the reboot treatment. But that's all I have for the Carlos King Kenya Moore interview, guys. Like I said earlier, make sure you go check it out if you haven't seen it. If you haven't seen part 2, it's up on his YouTube channel. And before I let you guys go, just a couple of reminders. If you are not following me on TikTok, please do so, because I go there first with all my recaps, my Bravo Celebrity news, anything that's going on, I go there first. If you're not following me there, you're missing out on anything that is breaking. Also follow me on Instagram at Georgio Says. And if you're not subscribed to my YouTube channel, please get subscribed, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you know when I upload. And if you're feeling very kind and generous and you like this podcast and this episode, please go ahead and give me a 5-star review wherever you're listening or watching this podcast. I would greatly appreciate it and would greatly help out the podcast. I'm excited. This is episode 2 of week 1, where I said we're going to be doing episodes Monday through Friday. So thank you for tuning in for my Tuesday episode. And until tomorrow, guys, I will talk to you tomorrow. Have a good night.